Jason had grown accustomed to walking into danger with the calm precision of someone who had stopped flinching at uncertainty long ago, but stepping into Britt's small room above Bobby's felt different. The air carried a tension he rarely sensed from her, an almost trembling stillness, like the fragile quiet before a storm breaks. The cramped space, normally cluttered with medical journals, half-finished coffee cups, and reminders of a life lived too quickly, now looked stripped of its usual chaos. Britt had tried to make it appear normal, but Jason could sense the effort in every detail, the way she stood too straight, the way she avoided looking directly at him, the way her hand remained too close to an object on the table she wasn't ready to explain. He had come for answers, about the key she had buried deep in half-truths, vague warnings, and increasingly obvious fear. But the moment he stepped inside, he realized that the mystery surrounding the key was only one layer of something far more dangerous. Britt was not only nervous. She was terrified. The kind of fear that made a person reconsider every decision they had made up to this moment, the kind that reshaped allegiances and rewrote priorities, the kind that told him whatever she was involved in, it was now spiraling beyond her ability to manage. Jason had spent years learning to read people quickly, efficiently, and without the burden of emotional interference, yet something about the way Britt stood there, shoulders tense, eyes glistening with a battle between confession and instinct, struck a chord deeper than he expected. She was holding on to something that could tear her life apart, and her silence was not a refusal but a desperate attempt to protect something or someone beyond herself. He understood instantly that she wasn't hiding out of malice but out of survival. He tried to anchor the moment by reminding her that whatever she had stepped into, she didn't have to navigate it alone. But Britt's reaction was not calm relief. Instead, a rush of emotions cracked through her composure. The rare vulnerability she displayed was almost shocking. Britt Westbourne was not someone who cried easily, nor someone who admitted fear lightly. Yet her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, the weight of her decision pressing against her lungs like a physical force. Jason could sense she was testing him, measuring whether the man standing in front of her was someone she could entrust with a truth that might destroy them both if shared with the wrong person. Britt wasn't afraid of Sidwell's threats in the usual sense. She had dealt with dangerous people before, criminals, power-hungry executives, unhinged researchers who valued science over morality. But Sidwell was different. He operated in the shadows between legitimate research and forbidden experimentation, and he wielded information as ruthlessly as any weapon. If Britt had crossed into his domain, knowingly or accidentally, she would now be carrying knowledge capable of reshaping lives, loyalty, and scientific boundaries. And she understood that once such information was spoken aloud, there was no turning back. It wasn't merely the project itself, it was the implication of it, the destructive potential hidden behind clinical terminology and coded data files. Britt knew that stepping out of line could trigger consequences she wasn't sure anyone could control. Sidwell had made that clear in his own chilling, roundabout way. Whether he intended to threaten her or simply to warn her, she could no longer separate caution from fear. Every decision she made now carried a shadow. Jason could feel her slipping into a moral crossroads. To say nothing meant surviving another day but allowing a project of unknown magnitude to continue unchecked. To say everything risked unleashing forces she had no certainty he could contain, despite his notorious ability to handle the worst. She needed more than reassurance. She needed proof that trusting him was worth the danger she would inherit from the moment she opened her mouth. Her fear wasn't just about Sidwell or the scientists working under him. She feared herself, her own guilt, her own mistakes, her own vulnerability. Somewhere along the line, Britt had stumbled into something she wasn't ready to face alone, and she had reached the terrible point where silence was as dangerous as the truth. Jason could feel her unspoken question hovering in the air. If she placed her life in his hands, would he treat it with the gravity it demanded? She had survived betrayal, abandonment, and professional ruin before, but this time the stakes were far higher. The wrong step might not only cost her career but her life. Jason sensed her turmoil and recognized its depth. Beneath all her bravado, Britt was searching for something she had rarely found, someone unwavering, someone who didn't recoil at difficult truths, someone who wouldn't dismiss her fear as exaggeration or weakness. She wasn't asking Jason to fix the danger she was in, she was asking whether he could withstand the truth without shattering the fragile hope she had clung to long enough to ask him here. Trust was unfamiliar territory for both of them. Jason had built his life around silence and loyalty without the expectation of understanding in return. Britt had survived by keeping emotional distance, maintaining her wit as both shield and weapon. Now they were standing in a space too small to run from the weight of their shared uncertainty. As the moment stretched, Britt's inner struggle deepened. If she revealed the truth about the project, she would be directly defying Sidwell's warning, an act that might trigger retaliation she could not predict. Her research, so deeply entangled in Sidwell's ambitions, now seemed like a trap disguised as opportunity. She had been drawn into something unethical and undeniably dangerous. And Jason's presence forced her to confront what she already suspected, that the project was never about medical advancement alone. It was about control, influence, and the manipulation of scientific innovation for purposes no honest researcher would ever endorse. Britt could no longer pretend that Sidwell's threats were idle. His power extended beyond the lab and into the lives of those who crossed him. If Jason pressed her too hard, she feared the consequences might shift onto him as well. But if she kept silent, she risked being consumed by the very forces she tried to outrun. The question now rested heavily between them. Would Britt finally step out of her fear and reveal everything she knew, trusting that Jason could shoulder the danger with her? Or would she retreat into secrecy, hoping that silence would shield her from Sidwell's wrath while knowing deep down that the project's reach extended far beyond her control? The answer would determine not only her fate but the direction of their fragile connection. Jason's steady presence offered a lifeline, but Britt's decision required more than courage, it required faith in someone other than herself. In the dim light of that small room above Bobby's, she felt the weight of the key, the truth, and the choice pressing in on her with equal force. And as she stood on the precipice of confession or retreat, one truth became painfully clear: if Britt chose to trust Jason, she would be risking everything she had left. If she chose to stay silent, she might lose far more. For now, the room held its breath, waiting to see whether Britt Westbourne, trembling, exhausted, and filled with a fear she could no longer contain, would take the final step toward revealing the truth that might either save her or finish what Sidwell had already begun.